What are your first thoughts as far as the playoff committee with just proposing to go to 12 teams?
So the thoughts of any playoff expansion, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, let's look at the pros, we'll look at the cons. We have the positive boxes and the negatives. So the positive boxes, you're going to have 11 games as opposed to 3 games. So that's more revenue for the schools. They're obviously going to love that. We're going to get more meaningful games. So, people are going to love that. More opportunities to get more teams in. Maybe that helps eliminate some of this playoff fatigue where it's literally, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, OU, Georgia. Like there's 6 teams you feel like they can basically get in every year. So maybe that helps alleviate that. And in doing so, helps spread out recruiting somewhat. And so then, hey, I can go to a Penn State maybe and have an opportunity to still get in, even if I don't beat Ohio State, or, I could go to a Texas as opposed to an OU. And so there's some of that stuff in there. Like I said, it's going to be more games, more opportunities. You're going to have home sites potentially for playoff games. I know a lot of people love that. Now, if you're one of the top 4, you don't get a home site, but if you're one of 5 through 8, you could potentially get it. So I would be more of a fan of maybe just going to 8 so the top 4 get the home site for the first round. But then on the other side, you have this couple negative things. Okay, you're asking guys now to play like 16 games, and they're not getting compensated for it. They'll have name, image, and likeness, but they're still amateur athletes. And then also part and parcel with that, the best thing about college football is the sanctity of the regular season. The game with Ohio State against Oregon, that matters. When you have these big non-conference games, they matter. Ohio State plays Penn State or Michigan, like these games matter. Alabama, Auburn, you don't want to see a team. It's like, well, if I lose this game, I can still get in as maybe a 2 or even a 3-loss team. And so with all the positives hanging here, you have one massive negative on the other side, because I love watching games in October, knowing that they impact the potential outcome in January. And I think that might be lost when you expand this thing to potentially 12 teams.
Are you surprised they're going straight to 12, not going to 6 or 8 as we might have heard earlier?
I think that is surprising for a lot of people. The more I've dug into it, the more sense it begins to make. You want to have automatic bids for all Power 5s. So that's taking up 5 spots right now. Got to have that 6th spot potentially for Notre Dame, should they get in. And then you're like, well, if there's a group of 5 school, like a Cincinnati that's ranked, 7th, shouldn't they be able to get in? Well, now all of a sudden you have 1 at-large bid left. Well, the SEC doesn't like that, because if for some reason, Penn State or, Wisconsin's ranked ahead of Georgia or whoever it might be, well, then we only get 1 team in, and that doesn't sound very good at all. And so I understand why there's some pushback with that. And by the way, what I read today as well, with regard to the top 4 seeds, they said the top 4 conference champions would be awarded the buys. And so I think about that logically, and things are running through my head. All right, so you see the top 4 conferences. Well, Notre Dame's not in a conference. How does that play? Are they ineligible then to be able to be in one of the top 4? So there's a lot of things that need to be hammered out. And in 2 years, maybe Notre Dame's part of the SEC full time. I understand why the SEC is pushing against it. I'm for more at bats. I think it needs to be done responsibly, because we live in America where more is always better. But I don't know if more is always better when we're talking about going from, like a classic single to a Big Mac all in one jump.
What surprised me is the fact that there are 4 teams that get buys instead of maybe the top 2, that they mentioned in the ranking, it's all going to go by the rankings, but it also said there's not going to be a limit of how many teams per conference get into the top 12. So you could have 6 teams from the SEC get in, and the other 6 are from the Big Ten, from the ACC, and so on and so forth. Are you surprised they didn't cap anything? Are you surprised that the top 4 seeds get a bye?
Not surprised that they're doing buys. If you're doing 12, it's kind of how you have to do it. I would be more proponent of 8. Here's the one thing I will suggest, though. When you have 4 teams, everybody wants to find the 4 best, unless most deserving best. You're always juggling this, and how does it look? You want competitive games and everything. But if you're going to open it up to 12, you need to try to eliminate some of that subjectivity where people always complain about the committee. We wanted the committee forever. But if you get to 12, I think it should be more of an objective criteria. And I would not be opposed to bringing back the BCS point system where everybody knows, like, all right, if you're 13th as opposed to 12, you really can't cry all that much. But no one can say, well, there was 4 teams got in from this conference because these people in a room ultimately decided that we think those are the 4 best teams should come from the SEC, and Big Ten has 2 and Notre Dame, and there's a qualifier. Like, when you do that, then it's more of a transparent process when you have the ability to overweight one of these conferences like they could potentially do.
Last question on just the overall process. And if this does pass, they said it won't happen this year, it won't happen next year. Do you think that's good? Do you think that's good to wait a few years? Or do you think this should be, obviously it's probably too late to implement it now for this coming season. Do you think they should get into it next season, or do you think it's good to wait a few years?
Well, finances are going to be prohibitive in the fact that the TV deals, as we sit here and talk on television, those things are locked in and the bowl games are set out for the next couple of seasons. They did this with the college football playoff. They kind of did this with the BCS. Hey, we're going to do this in a couple years. We're going to do the playoff in a couple years. And so I understand they're kind of trying to grease the skids, if you will. And this is how it will work in the future. And if someone gets left out, then they can claim, hey, in the future, you'll have gotten in. And that's why this is ultimately going to be better. So I don't think time-wise, you could try to implement this in 6-7 months. It's going to be something that's going to have to happen in a couple of years. And frankly, like I said, there's still the Notre Dame factor hanging out there. Like, do they ultimately join the ACC for good? And if they do, that's not something that's probably going to happen just overnight.
When it comes to Ohio State, how do you look at this? How does this impact the Buckeyes specifically with going to 12, possibly going to 12?
It's going to be a fine line, because I know every Ohio State fan would love to see a playoff game in the shoe, especially if you could play a team, from the ACC or SEC where they're coming up and it's cold and it's January and it's like an NFL playoff environment. It's cold. You can see the snow coming down. It would be absolutely tremendous. The players would love it. The fans would love it. It'd be terrific. But then you ultimately want to be one of the best sport, because you can't lose a game you don't play in. So there'll be a little battle in that. I guess we take for granted as well that Ohio State just seems to win the conference every year, like they've done almost certainly for the last 7 to 10 years, and especially the last 4. But I think it opens up a pathway where you would expect Ohio State to literally get in every single year, because there's no reason you would think, well, the years they've been left out, they may have been the best team, they just lost the wrong game. And in a situation like this, you're going to get Ohio State in as an at-large team who's probably sitting at 6 or 7, even if they lost a critical game to Wisconsin, the Big Ten championship, or Michigan or Penn State, or pick whoever.
Losing to Iowa and Purdue now don't become as big as it could be with going to 12. One thing I did notice is rematches won't matter. So, you could see Ohio State play a Penn State again, or could play if Michigan were to get into the top 12. You could see Ohio State versus Michigan. Do you think that would be good for the Buckeyes to have another game against another Big Ten opponent?
And so you see that happen now with the conference championship games occasionally around college football. You see some of those rematches, because you conceivably play a team 3 times. And you ask yourself that, like, for Ohio State, and you split with Wisconsin and you both get in, and all of a sudden you guys are playing the second round. I love the fact in college football, it's a one-off and you play each other once. I played in the NFL. I'm playing teams twice. There's a familiarity. But listen, when you win that one game, you've won it. You've won the rivalry. You've won whatever it is. And so I don't necessarily want to see that. I'm not a fan of it. I know it can happen now in the championship game. Like I said, you could conceivably see some of these elite teams. You can see Bama and Georgia, or Bama and Florida play 3 times. You can see Ohio State, Michigan, or Penn State play 3 times because of how it's set up. You could see Oklahoma, Texas play 3 times. And I don't know if anybody really wants to see that in the college football landscape.
Overall, do you see this as a good thing for college football and a good thing for Ohio State, or would you have liked to see something different?
I'd like to see it go to 8, maybe. I mean, Ohio State's been getting them with forward in the foreseeable future with how well Ryan Day is doing and their recruiting. I can't imagine them not being able to get in as one of the top 4. So if we expand it to 8, is it a little better? Does it maybe assure them getting in? Probably. There's going to be a lot of revenue that comes from this. You're going from 3 to 11. I'm not a math major, but I know that that's a substantial increase. I want to know where that's going and how that's benefiting the student athletes, because you're going to be asking these guys now to carry a lot of water for a lot of things. And this TV rights deal, which is going to be renegotiated, is not going to be cheap. So that's always my question, is what's in it for the players, since they're the ones ultimately that are doing the lion's share of the work.
You know, I remember having conversations with you about the NFL adding one extra game. Now we're talking two extra games for if you aren't one of the top four seeds. And it sounds like it's going to be a definitely a difference in scheduling for practices and everything like that.
It will be a difference. And then also, like, you look at those games, is a 5 versus a 12, is that a game you really want to see? Maybe it's good. Maybe it's a 30-point blowout. And so you try to balance, like, I like watching good football. And we have some blowouts now in the playoff as it is. So is expanding it, will that help in the immediate future? I'm not sure. But I like watching good football games. I love giving guys an opportunity. I look back at my career. You go to a 14 playoff, I probably get a chance to play for 2 more national championships, and maybe we win one more. I have no idea. Maybe we don't win the one that we had if we have to play another game after Miami. I can't tell you that. But, in looking at this, I think it substantially changes the ability to get some teams in there that maybe wouldn't have had an opportunity. But I don't know if that'll ultimately change the outcome.
I'll get you out on this. The group of 5 has always been a conversation when it comes to the college football playoff. They really don't have much of a shot to get in now with going to 12. They'll have a lot bigger shot with a lot of MAC schools and group of 5 schools in the state of Ohio, Cincinnati, OU, Bowling Green, Akron, etc. Do you see this as a possible good thing for them to try to get an 11, a 12, a 10 seed to try to get a good thing financially for what they could come with, for what maybe could be an upset?
Yeah, this will be massive for the group of 5 schools. If your conference, and the Big Ten splits everything, every conference does it differently. But if you're at Cincinnati, them making it to that New Year's Day 6 Bowl last year, that was huge for them financially. And they're poised to be right in that conversation in the top 10 again. So that's massive for the American Conference. It's massive for Cincinnati to be able to do that. And, they're a couple plays away from potentially beating Georgia. Now, I don't think you're going to have a school that's Cinderella-like in basketball just because it's set up so much differently. Basketball, you need 2 players. Football, I mean, you've got to have a good team, offense, defense, and everything. But I do think it'll be an opportunity to be able to disperse some of the revenues down to some of the group of 5 schools. And there will be a big push to make sure you have the best team in that group of 5 so that, should your conference be elected, your top, boom, you're going to get in, and that'll be a huge windfall for everybody.